and then there's flowers and all that type of thing usually before the beginning, but we decided to do low key today.
That's why I didn't worry.
Okay,
Well, it is 8 o'clock now, so I am going to call the meeting to order. It's October 11th, and this is the Whatcom County PUD's regular commission meeting. And the first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda?
I don't have any, Christine.
well, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second,
The change I would ask is to drop the executive session.
Oh, right. Okay. That's a good
Yeah, I'll
point.
revise my motion to remove the executive session and approve the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner.
and you looking for a second? 'Cause-
Yes, please.
Okay. You have a second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. The motion carries. Next item is consent agenda. So the approval of the meeting minutes from September 27th and the approval of claims for October 11th.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as it reads.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. So next item is our first public comment. We always have two at our meetings, at the beginning and the end. And so this is our first public comment. So please come up to the mic if you're in the room, or raise your hand if you're on Zoom, if you'd like to make a comment. Not seeing any hands on Zoom. Looks
Nobody in
like-
person wants to make a comment right now,
Okay,
Commissioner.
okay, great. And as I said, there's another public comment period at the end of our meeting. So moving on to old business. The first item under old business is the broadband program update. Chris, are you going to kick us off on that?
Just real briefly, we've got a meeting with the county council this afternoon. They want to talk to us about the Port PUD broadband efforts. And we have our normal meeting with the local loops group on Friday this week. And that's all I have to report. I'd like to turn it over to Andrew for a quick update.
Morning, Chris, commissioners. Thanks for having me. Just to piggyback off of that, I have a light update for you this morning. Thank you for your involvement last meeting for the WSBO Washington State Broadband Office call for comments. We were able to organize ourselves quickly and get those questions submitted in a timely fashion. And the port, PUD, Petrichor, we all agreed on a number of the questions like the open access and challenge process and digital equity. So the big points, we were all, we said it in our own words, but we were all agreeing with our recommendation to the state, which is a good thing. We've talked briefly in the past meetings about the FCC Fabric data, which is, if you think about it, we're basically acting as an extension of the FCC. What they're trying to do right now is very, when you think about it, just kind of basic. They're just trying to understand where all the residences and businesses are located and just starting there. So they're using local governments as an extension of the federal government to identify all of these address points. And so we've received preliminary access to the Fabric data, and we're going through now and just cross-referencing our data points with the county address points and making sure we have all of our ducks in a row. And the reason why that's important is because what will happen next is the internet service providers will come along and they'll apply their availability over each of those address points at the address location specifically. And then from there, we'll know, well, who's served and who's not served. And that will go up into what the state receives from the federal government under the Biden infrastructure package. So it's actually a really important process. And so we're just happy to be part of that. But that's my report for now. Chris mentioned we're going to be talking to the county council today about our Port PUD relationship. and things are just moving along, and we're just waiting for the state to drop that NOFO soon. Yes.
I have a question. I've heard from a few people that since the port and the PUD have gotten involved in broadband, that the private companies are actually out there doing a better job. I'm hearing things like they're starting to listen to their customers, be more proactive. Is that true? Are you hearing that, or have you know anything about that?
Yes, I think there's representation from the port here who could probably speak to that too. And Chris, we've all had, and myself, we've all had conversations. And one in particularly is the glacier communities. We had talked in depth about how we serve them, and we were coming up with creative models that we have been pursuing and we've talked about in great length here. And then were informed just recently that one of the internet service providers is actually, here's the timeline that they're going to meeting, and they're working with the community, and community members have told us they've seen their construction crews out there actually working. And so it's amazing when you say, here's a project area we're going to target. And then all of a sudden, well, we've got it. Don't worry about it, which is actually a good thing, because the more that they can do on their own and the less we have to do, that's probably a good thing.
Good.
And kind of the real irony of that is we were talking with one ISP, and the action that you're seeing in the field is from another ISP.
Yes.
So competition is really, it's a good thing.
Good. Thank you for that.
So regarding the address points, obviously the PUD is not a land use organization. So most of that information is residing with the county and the city. And that is a new request on staff at the county and the city. And what is our awareness about what kind of resources they need, and what kind of are those resources being applied for the purpose of providing that data? Is, I'm guessing, but you can also clarify, if more address points or the higher fidelity information that is provided by local government, particularly county and city, the more beneficial it is to the public. And if we err on the side of providing less information, that will mean there's less to identify that has to be covered. Is that correct?
Yes, and also just to add an additional layer to all of this is even if we miss, like a bulk number of address points, so to speak, scattered around the county, for instance, the next phase, you'll see publicly available. The FCC will make these address points available with the provider's service availability by the end of the year as their timeline. And then the individual homeowners or business owners will also be able to submit a challenge as an individual location if they're not in the fabric. So they're really trying to take an aggressive approach to making sure we get this right.
Can I jump in just for a sec? Let me answer your question from a slightly different perspective, Commissioner. The information that we got on the fabric was electronic. And Andrew has taken all of the county and city data that we have available, imported it into the GIS, and he has that at an address specific level. He then took the federal data that came out and converted it to the same format as our data and ran the two data sets side by side and found out where there was any variance. And that was a fairly large number of address points. So the conclusion from that is that there could be some errors in the federal data, there could be some errors in the local data, or there could be common errors to both. And so we're now kind of sorting through that. At the end of this, we'll be able to give the federal government our idea of what the total address points look like in Whatcom County. We'll also be able to give that same feedback to the county. So we'll be able to help true up everybody's database. And I guess the good news is Andrew's so good with GIS that while it sounds like a monumental Herculean task, he's reduced it to something that's really manageable.
And so to clarify, we're doing a lot of the work for the county and the city. Is that a correct statement?
I think that what we're doing is we are correcting the federal database. And while we're doing that, we may find errors in the county database, and we will give those errors to both parties.
Mm-hmm. And happy about that. Because like I said, I was worried about sufficient resources and skill set being applied from the county and the city level on the subject. So I'm glad we're doing that. And then secondly, for me, it's an important thing to note for us as an organization because obviously in the area of water and at times in energy, we are providing countywide services. And to me, this falls into that same kind of a category of a countywide service you're providing that may or may not directly impact the PUD's efforts as it relates to connectivity and broadband. So in that sense, I'm happy that it's a service you're providing that will go beyond anything we deploy.
Any other questions about broadband, Commissioner Grant?
Yeah, I just was gonna provide an update now rather than during my commissioner report, since it's broadband related, that I've had a few conversations with council member Galloway from the Whatcom County Council about broadband. And then we also had a meeting with Commissioner Michael Shepard from the port to discuss the questions that the county council has related to broadband that they hope to be addressed at the 2:30 meeting this afternoon. And as I said in our last meeting, I've received questions from both council members Frazee and Galloway about how the port and the PUD are working together on broadband, who's in charge, how decisions are made, how we're utilizing staff resources. And so after getting those questions, I asked Chris to arrange a meeting with the port's executive director, Rob Fix, to discuss a possible update to our interlocal agreement, or, at the very least, kind of taking a look at it again. We first did that interlocal agreement in the summer of 2021, and we had no broadband staff then. We hadn't hired Chris yet. So, a lot's changed since then, and I just want to make sure that our interlocal reflects those changes, and that Chris's role especially is clearly spelled out. So that's the only update that I need to make right now about broadband. I plan to attend the 2:30 county council meeting to hear Chris, Gina, and Andrew's presentation. So that's it for me on broadband.
Christine,
Yeah,
could we just take a pause moment to welcome Wapuda? They're just coming in through the door.
of course,
And so they can sit in. So we'll just take a moment, please.
of
We need
course.
to put some more chairs out. There's 4 of them.
Welcome, Wapuda.
Good morning.
Should I play some music from my computer?
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Here we are. Thank you. Sorry for the Hi, sir. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Yeah. The red carpet on.
We're good. So please grab a seat. We have first limited audience space.
Thank you, Christine.
Oh,
Everybody
yes,
is seated.
wonderful. Well, very warm welcome to Wapuda, and we're just trucking away through our agenda here. So do we have any other broadband program updates?
I have none right now.
Okay. Great. Well, then let's move on to the next item under old business, which I believe is the Cherry Point Development Study. And we have Don Goldberg from the Port of Bellingham here with us today. Welcome, Don.
Good morning, everyone. Don Goldberg, Director of Economic Development for the Port and Whatcom County. I am here today to talk a little bit about Cherry Point, the relationship with Cherry Point and the PUD, the port, the county, and jobs. I have this, if you can see this, these are just some of the reports that have been done on Cherry Point by the PUD and the port over the last 25 years. They started in 1997. Then there was a 1998, there was a 2000. I did an update in 2019. They all say the same thing, that we should develop Cherry Point in some fashion, that a master plan should be done, that we should know what the asset is and know how we can develop it and what the best places are for development. We've probably spent more than $500,000 of public money on analyzing this, and we still really haven't done anything. So my report that was done in 2019 pretty much told the same story as the same company's report in 1998. So we sit here with one of the best resources in the state, approximately 7,000 total acres of heavy industrial land that is not far from the freeway, near the border, has always been kept as heavy industrial for large campuses. And because of large campuses being owned by multinational companies, they've only planned their own campus. They have not planned the region. And so that's why we find ourselves in this situation that nobody has taken on the cost and the work of master planning all the utilities, infrastructure, road systems, egress, ingress, all the things that are necessary to have this property developed properly. So what happens is the PUD and I receive calls from incredible opportunities, hydrogen campuses, battery manufacturers, things that we would like here for the future. And then when we tell them that it'll probably take 5 years for them to get their land use done, and we're not sure whether they'll get approvals and it will cost millions of dollars, they move on. And this is a repetitive story that we hear all the time. So the idea of taking this resource and trying to do something has been in the public's eye for a long time, but nobody has taken responsibility. So for the last few years, I've been working with you, the PUD, and the county on trying to change that situation. And what I perceive as an opportunity here would be for funding and work to be done by the PUD, the port. The way I see it, it would be funding between the 3 public agencies, plus the Commerce Department, potentially curb grants. And then I would be asking the private sector, large companies in Cherry Point to help fund this opportunity. And so I kind of wanted to go over why, why should each group do it? The sub area is an incredible asset. There is raw land there that has a very low tax base right now. If we help the private sector complete a binding site plan out there, the value of that property goes up a couple of fold. And then if we build buildings on it and put operations on it, then tax base goes up tremendously. So there's an enormous potential for tax increase for the county. There's also an enormous job opportunity. There's potential for thousands of high-paying jobs out there. So the county really has probably the most benefit out of it. So what's the benefit to you as the PUD? It's one of your main focus areas. Currently, you don't have many power customers, and it would give you the opportunity to bring power to a number of other large and mid-sized companies. So it would facilitate potential water and power, your main the main benefits that you bring to customers. And then the port, of course, my job is outside of pandemics and housing and childcare, it's to actually bring good paying jobs. And every once in a while I forget that because we've been so caught up in the changes in the economy and the world situation. But really our primary focus should be how do we bring in clean, high paying jobs? And being right on the border, about 80% of the larger companies that are here right now in our county were Canadian started companies. And we probably have about 9 out of 10 companies that call us are Canadian wanting to move here. So it's in a great proximity to the border. As of today, we've moved forward and gone backwards in some ways. So back in 1998, when that other study was done, we had a 4th terminal potential. We didn't have restrictions on fossil fuels, which I support, but they are another restriction. So now we're not only haven't gone forward since 1998, to some degree, we have less opportunities. And there's been some changes out there. We know Alcoa closed about 2.5 years ago. I am still working with them. There is some very good news there that I'm hoping will come to fruition. But so Alcoa's 700 jobs we lost there. Hopefully we'll get that back. Alta Gas purchased the majority of Petrogas, and also purchased all of Alcoa's remaining lands. So we know Alcoa is not going to stay there. And we know Alta has this additional 1,000 acres that they don't know what to do with, and they need service as well. So this study of a master plan design not only will help the public, but it also should give knowledge to all the large users out there. As it's built out, they're going to have more traffic. There's going to be more strain on the grid. So it will benefit them as well. So we'll get a clearer vision. We'll get out in front of land use requirements, which is very important. We'll be prepared and ready for state and federal grants, which you can't go asking for money without the data that supports that. We'll be able to coordinate all the large users out there that currently do their own thing. And hopefully we'll be prepared to bring in maybe a major hydrogen user or manufacturer or some of these energy companies for the future. So it's a lot of information quick. I just want to give you a little update of what we're thinking about. Cherry Point sits there as this incredible asset. I'm a believer that we'll probably be seeing a continued slowdown in the economy. It's the perfect time to plan. If it takes 2 to 3 years to get this work done, that's why do it during a hot market when you can do it when things are slowing down. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
And so, Don, you did a good overview of what the benefits are for the county. Thank you, Ann. I can even see you, what you're thinking for what the county benefits, what the port and the PUD benefit. But what do the private sector industrial folks, particularly PCT6 and BP, how do they benefit from a study?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, this would be, I'd like to take it past a study. As I've said, we've studied it enough.
Right,
So,
okay.
so I'm actually doing 30% planning design.
Thank you for clarifying.
The benefit to them is they still, BP is about to invest almost $200 million in their assets. So as that area gets built out without a master plan, which will occur, but just it won't happen organized, traffic will occur, potential hazards on the rail crossings, wetlands continue, and which I didn't mention. I'd also be looking at wetland mitigation bank, which the region needs out there as well. So it's organizing the ability for them to move and grow as well as everybody else. I have spoken with the majority of them out there, and they have initial interest in participating, which includes SSA as well. SSA Commissioner, has the largest undeveloped asset there of approximately 1,500 acres, and they need this work too. And they are unwilling to move forward with the cost of doing a binding site plan not knowing what else will happen out there. And it would only affect their property rather than the entire region.
So to summarize what you said, their interest depends on the degree to which this kind of pre-permitting and planning supports their growth and development objectives.
That, as well as other development in the region, will potentially have a negative effect on them if it's not coordinated properly.
So not wanting to speak on behalf of anybody, but still being exposed now to conversations that happened around the extensive debate we had around the revision of the Cherry Point code. One of the things that is probably a historically wise practice for the refineries in particular is to develop projects as a process of ongoing improvement type of model with a relatively low profile, with a relatively driven by process safety and inefficiency kind of objectives. And history shows that advertising growth for their facilities has not gone over well. Cogen comes to mind, and the renewable diesel project comes to mind. So I think to try to support what you're doing and the idea that you're presenting, what would be probably the kind of thing that would shift the support and enthusiasm for the refineries would be that it supports their more grander, broader scale development efforts and creates a some degree of safety of publicly discussing projects that quite often don't materialize because of public exposure.
Yeah, I would say that's true, but the 30% master plan design does not get into each individual's property. So what they do, if we use Phillips or BP, won't be affected by this, other than maybe a power study will show how we can make the grid more efficient. So that would be a benefit to the whole public, but it would also, of course, benefit them. The other thing is some hydrogen companies now are looking to go into Cherry Point where they would service the fossil fuel companies. So that benefits them, but they can't do it if they don't have the capability of getting through their land use. So there's direct benefits that we can help them with. And then there's a lot of indirect benefits that might be solar or other types of energy. And as I mentioned before, it's going to eventually get developed. And if it can be done properly with thought that where you're organically looking at the entire property rather than how it's been developed individually in the past, it'll benefit everyone.
Hey, Don, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you've been saying 30%, kind of 30% of the planning needs to be done. Can you explain a little bit about how, so you think if we get that portion of the planning done, then we can attract new businesses to come that will take on the remaining planning and the costs associated with that planning?
Yeah, so you can't really go any further than 30% design because we don't know who the user is. So 30% is really the maximum pre-design you can do. That will get you through if a 30% design model would actually get a public type 3 land use, which would be rezoning. So if this property was zone ag and we wanted to go rezone it industrial, we would have to go through a full 30% design. So it allows us to not only analyze from a data point of view, but actually have engineers, traffic engineers, planners, civil engineers, all do the actual work for the roads, what it will take, do all the studies on what potential traffic it would be incurred with a particular type of growth. So there's a lot of factors in it, but it mostly occurs based upon what we all sit down and figure as the best case and worst case scenario.
Okay.
You're muted.
Yeah. Thank you. And then my other question was, you said in your initial description that part of what this work would do would be to help coordinate all the users out at Cherry Point, and that right now they're all doing their own thing. Can you explain that a little bit more and what the benefits would be of coordinating all the users out there?
Yeah. Well, the one company that comes to mind right now would be Alta, who was a 1/3 owner of Petrogas, and then about a year ago or so bought another third. So now they're the majority owner of Petrogas, and they also, as I mentioned, bought about 1,000 acres from Alcoa. So I have not heard from them as to what their plans are, but they're going to come up against the same thing as any private developer. What can they do with their land without having any knowledge of land use for infrastructure and things we've been talking about? So they would have a tremendous benefit from the public doing this work, because otherwise they would have to take it all on for their own project, which they would focus only on their project. So again, if we coordinate with all of them, the concept, which is just a concept at this point, would be for myself and the port to lead the effort with the PUD, and then hire the proper consultants that do the work, and then to drive an end product that we would also include the private sector to the table, as well as probably the Lummies and others to work through it. But I'm not looking to create another committee where everybody votes and we don't get anywhere. It would be more of a committee for knowledge purposes and participation. But I think at some point, some organization or person needs to drive it and take it all the way to the end, and that would benefit. Like, for instance, BP has its own campus. They're working on their campus. They're not going to build a bridge on Grandview. They're not going to widen the roads, and they really don't care if power gets to SSA. There's no reason for them to do that. So that's where we've broken down here. Everybody is doing their thing with nobody. If the public owned a large asset there, if we owned 500 acres, we probably would have done this a long time ago. But since we don't have public ownership, there's DNR owns about 150 acres, and that's it. That's the public ownership in Cherry Point. So that's why it's kind of stalled. And I have had, as well as Steve Jilt, so many calls and meetings with large potential users that we would probably want here, but they run when they find out there's no land use that's been done there.
Don, is it Don? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a few questions?
I'm ready.
I'm not sure if the suggestion of a 30% planning design would benefit Cherry Point at all, and I'm going to tell you why. I myself have gone to the county trying to develop, and I've hired all the engineers, and I hired architects, and I hired people to speak on my behalf, and I sat there and watched everything get put down at my expense. I had money out there.
Mm-hmm.
When I asked why wouldn't they accept it, they couldn't tell me. They told me it was my job to figure it out. Well, how can I read their minds? And when I think back of all the companies going all the way to, say, Chicago Bridge and Iron, and all the companies who up here, I have been told over $25 million have been spent by the private trying to develop Cherry Point. And it's always come to one thing. The county has stopped them on every corner. Otherwise, the county has not supported the development of Cherry Point. The county council has to make a decision on what they will permit out there.
Mhm.
And then we, you, us can act on it. Because saying hydrogen is coming out there is only one thing. But the people may not want that.
Mhm.
Someone's got to stand up and say, what can we do out there? What we can develop out there? And then we will all do our part. Now you say, you know, $500,000 has been spent by the county, by the public. But yet, if you ask the PUD, it's our customers that pay our percentage if we do a study. The county, it's going to be the taxpayers again from the Cherry Point, which by the way, Cherry Point covers a big percentage of our tax base in this county. Without them, we'd be really hurting. Did you say the port's going to be involved in putting some money into this?
Potentially.
Okay, and then the owners, again, all I see is the taxpayers saying the industry out there is going to be paying for all this, and it's not going to benefit them till someone stands up and says, look, what can that property be used for? What are they going to authorize it to be used for? And we will step in and we'll do our part once somebody makes that decision, county council.
Mhm. Well, as we all know, commission seats change constantly, as they do at the county council. So part of the concept here, Commissioner, is to, because of that $25 million approximately that you mentioned that the private sector has spent out there, other companies are not willing to spend anymore, right?
No.
I shouldn't say that. There is a company under contract right now that's spending a lot of money out there to see if they're going to come into the district. But in general, that's true. And that's that comes back to why we want to do this. If I get the county support, which they'll be paying for it through the taxpayer, as you pointed out, they then have a lot more skin in the game because they are approving me to take certain actions, or whoever is in charge of doing this. They will be under contract with that person and organization, and they will have already voted to support the process. So once that process is done, then companies like yourself or another one would have the opportunity to go directly to the county for doing a grading permit, and utility knowledge would already be there. Hopefully, I don't have a number, but it's in the tens of millions of dollars to improve the roads and utilities. And so the idea would be, again, all of our monies eventually come from the taxpayer. Outside of the port, I think about 26% of our money comes from the taxpayer. So we're still, dependent on the tax of it, and that includes federal money as well. But that's what we would be going for, is state and federal money to actually put these improvements on. Maybe a bridge over Grandview so that there's better access. Certain things that will allow that development to have the developer or the user to have more knowledge that it actually will go through. There's no guarantee in any land development or user, but I would say the odds of knowledge with a binding site plan and design for the region, and having gone through that process with the county for a couple of years to get to there, would give users a lot more less hesitation and more likely knowledge where they're moving. And I do think the new ordinance protecting the region from additional growth and fossil fuels and things like that, there's finally some clarity. I mean, it's not as clear as we'd like it, but it's a lot more clear than it was. And I think the use of renewables will now be looked at much more positively. But as you all have pointed out, it doesn't stop the public from saying yay or nay, and there's always going to be some discussion. That's the region that we live in.
Okay, so I've a comment. It's always good to look at what other people are doing. We don't have to look very far. When I started my business in 2006, which is no longer in operation, It was a manufacturing business. I needed rail. I needed highway. I needed proximity to terminals. And Cherry Point was the perfect place. But I went to Skagit County. There's no comparison in the business environment in Whatcom County versus Skagit County. It was a renewables business. And it was very clear to me, and everybody I talked to in Whatcom County also confirmed to me. And since that time, which was 2006, I've spoken to at least a dozen small businesses that involve a different degrees of heavy industry that have moved to Skagit County. Some of them intimately. And so there was a town in Northern California that I tried to do a project in. And the name of the town was Pacifica, California, beautiful town. And their motto was, and unofficial motto was, Pacifica, the community which never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. I'd like us to be less like that. I'm not naive. I'm not expecting that the historical forces and the citizenry of our community is all of a sudden going to change their colors or their perspective. But I think we do need to do something. So you've got my support in that regard, the idea that we need to do something. But there are and
That was the good news.
but there are maybe smaller steps that we can take. Identify some specific types of projects. And by the way, one of the things that would be beneficial to folks like me would be to identify templates that have happened around the state where this kind of pre-planning has been beneficial. So we have kind of really smart people in the room here that have just joined. No, I'm looking at you, you guys. The new ones who just walked in. Maybe we'll have some conversation over lunch about this too. Very much would value your input. But one of the things that occurs to me is that we have a big grid reliability challenge, and that we're at the tail end of a distribution system. And energy storage might be something. Energy storage, maybe water storage, maybe the kind of thing that could be a slice of the kind of long range land use planning thing that would be particularly of interest to the PUD. Because we're increasingly discovering that the old reality is not the new reality. There's not just power to go around. Unless Chilean is coming here with a solution for Intalco. But I don't think so. I honestly would say that we may want to carve out. I would say that when carving out a smaller piece, we can make a success with one thing. Then we can do the kind of the broader. And you had some ideas in that regard regarding solar, right? So that would tend to be my bias.
And I could appreciate that, but to some degree, Commissioner, that's what we've been doing. We've been piecemealing everything in this county. I agree with what you said. I have a different way of putting it. I said one of the things I really appreciate about this community is that everybody is involved and has an opinion. And what makes my job miserable is that everybody's involved and has an opinion. So,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it's a yin and a yang, and so I don't believe we can continue to do what you mentioned just now, where we find a little piece, we improve that, then we go. Then we're not building an ecosystem. We're not looking at the whole, and we continue just to piecemeal this, and we don't do it correctly. It doesn't mean we're going to build it all out at one time, just like broadband is not being built out at one time. We're analyzing it, we're mapping it, we're raising funds, and we're building it. And I don't envision us building it out unless we were to get the funds. But But to actually have the plans approved and a master plan in place allows that small entity to move forward with the region having knowledge of how it fits into the whole puzzle, rather than sitting on its own. So that's my opinion.
I appreciate you, Don.
No, I
I
appreciate it.
really do. I really do. Which you just proved my point.
And how is
And
that?
how are we proceeding with broadband? We're cutting out we're grabbing the low hanging fruit.
Mhm. But that's a county-wide project in a very wide area with very different needs. This project is a 7,000 acre area that is designated as one area. And so we're by not doing it correctly, in my opinion, we just continue this process. And in terms of other areas that have done this, Commerce has a grant that we're not going to be applying for that we looked at. It's the first time they've had it. It's an industrial readiness grant, which would allow the public to help fund what we're talking about, because many areas have this problem. The problem that we have for this grant is the public has to own it. So there are a number of ports and public agencies that own land that are, again, if we had 500 acres in the middle of Cherry Point, we would be able to apply for that money and help map the entire region. But here, the only thing that's publicly owned outside of DNR are the right-of-ways. And I argued with Commerce to say that that was publicly owned land and that the right-of-way was owned by the county and that we should be able to apply for it. At this point, they said that you would have to go through a process to see if we would accept it. By that time, the money would be gone. So it didn't make sense. But it is a problem throughout. The low-hanging fruit has been developed. And Cherry Point is a complex property with unbelievable capabilities. And it can bring in those clean jobs, international jobs, support our relationship with our neighbor to the north, separate and isolate that type of use from housing. We can really do a balanced approach of how do we create jobs and build this out the proper way, and also do just as good a job of making sure the environment is protected.
So Don, can you, oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna thank Don for taking on a difficult job.
It's this part of my hair that used to be there. I did a lot of work like this. When my previous job at the Port of Portland, I was in charge of my group I was the director of business and economic development, and our team did the industrial development. So we actually did the Superfund development of an Alcoa plant. Amazon is there, FedEx is there. There are about 3,000 jobs created there. And we cleaned up a Superfund site. And when I was at the Trust for Public Land, we did very large land use deals that were often in conflict between environmental communities and business communities. And then for 20 years, I was industrial commercial real estate broker. So I've been doing it. I've been putting myself in this place for a long time.
Well, when I started here 24 years ago, I had a head of hair.
Yeah.
So,
So you can relate.
Well, yeah, we appreciate you, Don, that's for sure. Just kind of to begin to put a pin in this conversation, can you walk us through your next steps with your conversations with your own commission, with the county council? And just to back up, we have, after Executive Sadhu came a few weeks ago, we looked, we've had some discussions here in our commission meetings about this, and have looked at rate impacts. But I think we'll have to continue to have conversations as a commission. But can you go ahead and walk us through what your next steps are with those other governing bodies, and when you'd like to hear back from the PUD on this?
Sure. So the first part is to what I would say reverse engineer the whole process. How far do we go? The biggest part of the potential cost might be a power plan that you as the PUD can use with BPA. And that number could be enormous from what I've been told, or it could be somewhat reasonable depending on how far the PUD decides to take that. So the numbers I've heard are anywhere between 100 or over $600,000. So that $500,000 swing is would be an enormous part of this budget. Then I would go back to the private sector because I feel that it's very important they have skin in the game. So I don't believe that we should use taxpayers' money if the multinationals don't share some of the costs. So I have spoken with most of them, and I would go back to them and present this again and see if I can get some commitments. And then we would come back to the PUD, the county, and the port to see are they all players, and how much money do we expect them to participate in, and who would take that lead. Right now, I'm speaking on behalf of this, but the port and executive director Fix have not said, okay, go do that, because this will take a tremendous amount of time from somebody. And if I do take it on, then we have to see who will take on some of my work. As my team has not grown in 5 years, and we've taken on enormous amount of additional things. So there's some back office type of things that we'd have to talk about. But so I think that would be the first step, what I just mentioned. If we were able to organize that, then we would put an agreement together between us. And then I would start getting some costs on what it would cost to actually do the work. I'm thinking that we would probably hire a master engineering company. There are companies that I've used in the past where they actually have all the or most of the services in-house. They may go out for traffic engineering, but they would have all the civil and other types of work in-house, so it'd be easier to manage them. And I would expect the process would probably take about 2 years.
Great. And Chris, when you have our customer meetings next month, you're planning to bring this topic up with them?
Yeah, it's one of the potential topics that we've got. And I do want to point out that when money comes from the PUD, it does not come from taxpayers. It comes from a very small number of customers only. We do not have tax base. So my challenge is always to articulate how those customers are going to benefit from a given investment. And I'm struggling with that in this case. Commissioner,
Okay.
you're on.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm just looking at our agenda and, you know, if we're ready to, you know, Don, I think this was a great initial conversation, and it seems like we're going to have several more.
Yeah, and maybe we'll put it on old business to cover it at the next meeting as well.
I think that sounds like a good idea.
I personally, when I've talked to SSA and some of the others, SSA in particular, they see a great benefit to them on doing this. They have this $60–70 million asset sitting there. And they do not have a campus built, but when they were going to do the old coal mill terminal, then they didn't really care again, because they were going to build their own campus. So now that they don't have a campus use, this type of service would mean a lot to them. And I've confirmed that multiple times. So yeah, you know, there's as you've all brought up, it's not easy. If it was 25 years ago when we found out we should do this work, we would have done it. But it's getting more expensive, more difficult, and it's not gonna get easier or cheaper. And we're losing an asset that the region really deserves to use for a higher and better use.
Don, can you keep us informed if you're going to give similar updates to the county council or your commission on this topic? Because for me, it'd be helpful to attend those meetings if you're doing similar presentations.
Sure, this is the first time I've been asked. I think that probably the next conversation will be offline with Executive Sadhu, Rob Fix, maybe yourselves on, what does it really look like? And are we willing to take this on? Who will do it? Right now, I'm talking on behalf of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'll be the one to do it.
Okay. Okay, great.
But I'll be happy to
Commissioner
do that.
Murphy, Commissioner Deshmani, any other questions for Don?
None from me.
Yeah, none right now. Nope.
Okay, well, Don, we really appreciate you coming to the PUD and keeping us informed, and more to come.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to see you all. Thanks for the invite.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're free to stick around for the rest of the meeting. Super.
Okay, moving on to new business, and I see Brian just turned his camera on, so I'm guessing that you will be covering the change order number 16. Is that right, Brian?
That's correct, Commissioner. I want to wish everybody a good morning, both the commissioners and to our guests. What we're asking for, what staff's asking for today is approval of change order number 16 with Patalco, who is the general contractor constructing our new Ferndale substation. Several weeks ago, Patalco brought this change order to us for staff review. And over the course of those weeks, we conferred with Patalco. They had submitted a several page line item by line item documented, why they needed this change order, what the intent of the change order was. And so we negotiated with Patalco, and we're actually, admittedly, the change order dollar amount is significant, but we were able to negotiate the original dollar amount down approximately a little over $30,000. So we found some things that they agreed to that didn't need to be in there, but the rest we have reviewed and believe is justified. I have detailed in the action memo, some of the reasons for the change order. I make a couple of general comments is that, in my experience in doing projects over the last umpteen years is that there's a couple of items I think that are key to success of any project. And one of them is communication amongst the project team and sort of continuity of that communication. And the other item is momentum. You get a project started, you want to push it to the finish line. And in both those cases, it hasn't, because of changing conditions in the world in general, supplies chain disruptions, whatever, both communication was disrupted and also that momentum was lost. We had a changeover in staffing at the contractor level, at our engineering firms level, and case in point, for the PUD, the two original folks that were directly involved in the project no longer are with us. So there was quite a lot of disruptions along the way. The first part of this summer, it was apparent because of some of the disruptions and the fact that equipment that Patalco was attempting to procure wasn't available or wasn't delivered yet, that they were running out of work. And so we actually had an agreement. We had them demob from the project until we could work out some of the design issues, the equipment procurement issues, and there went our momentum. So with this changeover, Talco is poised to remobilize, come back on site and push this project through to the end. Absent the approval of the change order, we'll have to go back to the drawing board and decide what to do next. And so I think I'll stop there and just answer any questions you might have. And we'll proceed.
Ryan, I've had a couple of questions from commissioners, especially around the added security that was required. That was a big part of the change order. Maybe you could just address that right up front.
Yeah, that was an issue that came up when Patalco and PUD staff discussed them demobilizing from the project. You have to realize and bid projects like this, they are the owner of the project until we take ownership at the end when the project's complete. So anything that would go wrong, if there was vandalism, somebody came in and sabotaged equipment that was on site, that would be on them until we took over the project. And they were not willing to just let everything sit there without having security. And we understood that. So what the security element is to protect the project equipment, everything that was on site, what was already constructed, until such time as they'd come back on site to complete the project. And bear in mind, obviously, when they were doing construction out there, they were leaving the site at night, but we're just talking about an overnight situation. In this case, they demobbed it the first of the summer, and it's been several months. And so we agreed with them, site security is a necessary element.
And we wanted them to leave all of their equipment on site because that would greatly reduce both the cost and the timing of remobilization.
Correct.
Even though security ended up being $80,000.
Correct. And so, if things aren't cheap, and given the accumulated time, there wasn't any, we could have placed one of our staff on site overnight, but that would have been more than $80,000 over the time. I mean, and we would have lost that staff member to do other work. So, we're not staffed to provide 24/7 surveillance.
What was the primary design modifications?
There were several things, Commissioner. Everything, well, design in terms of, let's start with the easy one, landscaping. That design changed midstream because of changes that the city of Ferndale wanted, and changes, quite frankly, what they were asking for didn't work for us. And one example is they actually wanted us to basically put up landscaping that would hide the substation, basically from public view. An industrial facility, they wanted screening. And actually the original design had plants, shrubs all the way around the substation. Well, from a security standpoint, somebody hiding behind the shrubs, from a standpoint of those shrubberies, the roots growing into our ground grid, didn't work for us. And so we had to modify the original landscape plan. And as it turned out, we planted trees that faced the city of Ferndale property just to block the view of the substation, but they were far enough away that that was okay for us. That was one thing. The other thing was there were some design changes associated with the control house and also the switchgear that were going into the control house. And it was a combination of some design issues with the original design. It was communication problem with the supplier of the control house and the switchgear. And so what was delivered needed to be modified. We had negotiations with a supplier and they actually did some of the fixes at their cost. But other things that, there were other workarounds that made, the use of the gear in the control house easier to access and, safer. And so that was kind of a scope expansion that we supported, because sometimes you have a design and then you get into the project and you say, oh, I think there's a better way to do that. That happens frequently on different projects. So that was part of it as well. There was some rerouting of some of the communications conduit. It was just an accumulation of a number of things.
Thank you.
Can we answer any additional questions or?
I just have a comment. I want us to continue to keep track of, with respect to these change orders that are happening. What is the trend that we've seen over the last couple of years? And understanding that trend is useful information. Delays, as well as materials costs, are easy to attribute to the impact of the pandemic. And that's something I just want to understand. And it's been of interest of mine for some time now, and continue to be interested in understanding how that's affecting our operations.
Part of that's answered directly in our agenda item number 8. As I promised the commission, we're going to be bringing monthly a complete overview of all the change orders that are active, and we can have that discussion. But the purpose behind that is both transparency and for us to be able to look at it and say, here's something that is going right or wrong, and do more or less of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're not alone in this regard.
Right.
Commissioner Murphy, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm gonna take it easy on poor Brian, because it's at 18.5% increase in change orders over the original contract. And he knows how I feel about change orders, so I'm gonna leave you alone today, Brian.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody excited about change orders. Yeah.
No, and staff's not happy about the size of the cumulative effect of these change orders. It's just, we got into a situation we've never dealt. I mean, if you look at when this project was originally bid and the conditions under which the contractors made that bid, there was a sea change from then to the point where we're ready to construct that project. And I don't think anybody could have foreseen all the things that occurred during that time. Are we happy with it? No, it's just kind of the reality we're dealing with right now. And we are thinking about a number of things that we could do differently in the next major project that comes before us, to try to mitigate some of the things that we learned were issues this time around. And part of it, I'll have to say, is sort of a dilemma of the competitive bid process. Had the contractors been aware that there was a sea change coming, they might have built a large risk contingency into their bid, but then they risk not getting the bid. So what do you do?
I am good, if it's okay with the board, to make a motion to approve change order number 16 with Patelco.
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. The motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is very exciting. We have some guests from Wapuda. So please come up to the mic, whoever is joining us first from Wapuda, and a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Christine, for that welcome. And thank you for allowing us to take some of your time this morning. Appreciate it. I'm particularly excited and happy to be here today as a former alumni of Western Washington University, coming back to my old stomping grounds. And Liz and I had that conversation, another alumni sitting here as well. So real happy to be back. My name is Gary Arsenault, and I am a commissioner at Chelan County PUD, currently serving as the board president of WPUDA. And we're here today, really, I'm bringing with me a delegation of people, actually. We have George Kahn, who is the executive director of WPUDA. We have Liz Anderson, who is the deputy director of WPUDA. And we have Nicholas, who has stepped away for just a moment. Go Nicholas, yes, go Nicholas. He is the policy director at WPUDA. So we're here today really to share post-COVID opportunity to reunite. As my term started with WPUDA, one of the things that I guess it's a blessing in so much that it began right at the very tail end of all the restrictions for COVID. And so I had the opportunity to look in a rearview mirror and see what COVID had done really to the association, but also to the PUD industry across our state. We have 28 PUDs. And over the 2-year COVID period, we were all looking at each other in little square boxes.
Mhm.
Over that 2-year period, we also had a large number of new commissioners who were elected and did not have the opportunity to have that camaraderie that we get face to face when we meet down in Olympia. And so it was a pretty simple conclusion for me to say, we need to have some kind of a reunited tour. And so here we are, we're like the band WPUDA, and our tour is called Reunited. We're here today really to talk about some of the opportunities that WPUDA presents for the PUDs, the 28 PUDs across the state. WPUDA has not, they've heard me say this now, I don't know, 14 different PUDs so far. WPUDA has been like Santa's little workshop. So even though WPUDA has shut down, or the COVID has shut down a lot of the activities and the meetings face to face, these little elves have been very, very busy putting together all sorts of assets and tools that each PUD can use and reach out to, both for the purpose of training, but also for the opportunities that it presents to go and talk to our legislators to maybe have a little more leverage in getting some bills passed that will benefit PUDs across the state. And you're going to hear about that in just a minute. George is going to get up and talk about it, and Liz will carry on and explain some of the things that are really exciting, I think, that are in our toolbox now that we didn't have prior. The other thing that I'd like to talk about really is the strength in numbers. And as I mentioned now a couple of times, 28 PUDs across the state. So consider for a moment that if you're Pacific PUD and you have an interest in getting some kind of tsunami legislation passed in Olympia, your odds of getting that passed and being heard probably pretty low. But if you have 27 other PUDs that are supporting that legislation, your odds suddenly go up dramatically, especially when you have people like Nicholas, who's going to talk here in a moment about his resources and the time that he has spent in Olympia and the relationships that he has created. Your voice is going to get heard. If you're Okanagan or Chelan or Douglas, and you have an interest in wildfire litigation or legislation, our odds of being heard are pretty remote unless we have the support of other PUDs. And so therein, you got Pacific, who's willing to come forward and say, yes, we will support you, Chelan and Okanagan, and vice versa. We support the tsunami legislation that they're seeking. So that the value in numbers it's real, and you'll hear about it a little bit more. Nicholas has got some very, very interesting stories that hopefully he will tell about how a bill was dropped as a result of a Sunday news article in the Seattle Times. That bill was dropped on a Tuesday. So the article ran on a Sunday, the bill was dropped and I don't want to steal his thunder, but he's going to talk about how quickly he was able to address that. And being in Chelan, trust me, I don't read the Seattle Times. I'm not sure the Seattle Times is sold in Chelan. So we probably wouldn't have caught it, right? So that really, I think, is the point. please feel free to stop any one of us throughout our little talk and ask questions, because we love questions. And I think questions make us all stronger as we arrive at an answer. So, and I do also have to say that as I've sat here and I've listened to your meeting today, we share similar issues in Chelan, even though we're several hundred miles away. Same kind of topics come up and arise at Chelan as well. So I feel your pain.
You've got some change orders too.
We've got some change orders too. Trust me. We're trying to build a new headquarters and we've got lots of change orders. So anyway, George, if you would please. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Bye-bye.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting us. I'm George Kahn. I'm the director of the association. And I appreciate the analogy to Santa, Gary. The only thing I've worked on with Santa is my waistline. So, but we have been busy during the pandemic. And we are here to share with you some of the background, which many of you, because you're involved with the PUD Association, either know or are behind the scenes, but hopefully we'll be able to enlighten you. Nicholas he didn't just leave because he wasn't happy. He left because he had another call with the Department of Commerce. And just we're interdisciplinary and we work as a team. So we'll be able to fill in. Hopefully he'll be back. But I want to thank you for the opportunity to come up here and talk with you. I'm going to now turn it over to Liz, who's going to share some background, and then I'm going to follow up with some of the particular issues which you've all heard about as we've been in our meetings in Olympia. So Liz.
Well, good morning, commissioners. It's good to see you in person, and it's good to see Commissioner Grant on the screen. And if you don't mind starting the PowerPoint presentation, is she stepped away?
It's a one.
Okay, there she is. Okay, just like magic, it happens. So one of the things we realized when we started reuniting with our member PUDs is not everybody was aware of the resources and services that were available to all of you. And even people who had been at PUDs for quite some time were a little bit surprised that there were some services that they weren't aware of. So we thought it was really important to spend a little time reacquainting you with the services that we're able to provide to really maximize the value that the association can provide to your individual PUD. So with that, I'm going to start with a first slide that go ahead and advance, Ann. One. Okay. If we're not on your redial, here is all our contact information, and you can reach us at any time. These are the people who are present today. Next slide. So here's just a few quick facts about our history, which you may be aware of. And this is relevant because the way we function today really is a reflection of our history and how we started. The association was formed back in 1936. And that was 6 years after initiative number 1 was passed by the citizens of Washington, allowing the formation of PUDs. That was also a significant year because there was a constitutional challenge to the PUD law. And fortunately, we were victorious and we're all here today. So originally, the leaders of the PUD movement, the Washington State Grange, were also the leaders in establishing the association. The Grange Master called together commissioners from the existing PUDs at that time and said, okay, we've created this great opportunity for communities to own and operate their own utilities. Now we're going to hand the reins of leadership over to you. And we want you to be the advocates for PUDs and making sure that they're viable well into the future. So it started off as the Washington PUD Commissioners Association. In 1952, it changed. And it changed because the association recognized that there needed to be a greater emphasis on operational excellence. And the reason why that was important is because they realized that if you're not doing a good job serving your utility as a PUD, that really opens up the door for opponents of PUDs to come in and try to restrict our authorities or put regulations in place that might make it difficult for us to do our jobs. So at that point, the scope of the work expanded and we started doing the things that we do today, which includes training and information sharing to support each other in terms of our operations. So let's go to the next slide. This is our mission. We are here to support you and help you in the work you do to serve your communities. Next slide. And today our services fall into these 4 buckets: advocacy, training, education, collaboration, and information sharing, and policy research and analysis. Next slide. So this is your team of elves that have been busy. The one thing that we all agree on is these pictures are woefully out of date. And depending on who you talk to, some want to change these pictures. Some would rather just keep them the way they are. But but these folks are available to you. They're truly a dedicated group of individuals. They have a tremendous amount of expertise, and you can reach out to any of them if you have a question or a need. If they're not the right person, they'll make sure to connect you with the right person. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about our history, and it's reflected in our structure. Even today, we are a commissioner-led organization. And you see that in our board of directors, which is made up of elected commissioners, primarily from all our member PUDs. The board sets a strategic direction for the association. You have a voice in that strategic direction. Our executive officers are elected commissioners. And if you're interested in a leadership position, we always welcome people to run for those positions. We have policy committees that you and your staff members participate in that allow us an opportunity to really discuss the issues that are important to public utility districts and share information. And then we have other committees that you may have participated in as well. We have Commissioner Education, we have a strategic planning committee. The general managers meet and share information. We have a budget committee, finance, audit. We have awards committee. We give out awards annually. And then we have professional and roundtables. And this is one thing I really wanted to focus on for just a moment. We have a variety of professional groups in the PUDs that get together and they share information in these roundtables. We just had a couple of roundtables within the last couple of weeks. We have records officers that meet. We have administrative professionals, we have finance officers, human resource professionals, communications professionals, and they typically meet for a day and they have training and they share information. So this is a really good opportunity if your staff isn't already participating in the roundtables to be able to get in there and do a deeper dive on their professional areas and share information. Next slide. You're very well aware of our meetings. We meet almost monthly, and you have an opportunity in all our committee meetings to express your thoughts. You also have an opportunity, if you choose to, run for chair of the committee or vice chair of any of our policy committee. And that last bullet point is something I really want to emphasize. All of your staff members are welcome to attend our meetings. So if you have, for example, a new person that's coming on board and maybe they're not as familiar with PUDs in general, or they're brand new to the industry, they can attend our meetings. It's a really good way to get them up to speed on all the issues and kind of the bigger utility perspective. They're welcome to attend. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to hand this over to George in just a second to talk a little bit more about advocacy. Next slide. But want to start off by reminding you that, of course, the policy direction of the association is a reflection of its members. And we have the ability, as our president mentioned, to lend strength to a single PUD that has something important to them that they want us to work on. Or several PUDs that are interested in a topic, or the whole family of PUDs. So if there's a specific issue that's important to Whatcom County PUD, you have the ability to bring that to the association and seek support for that. We advocate year-round on your behalf. We're always busy working with other groups and our legislators and our members of Congress, and then report back to you on that. And with that, next slide. So this is just a list what I could remember of all our advocacy services. And our goal really is to keep all of you connected without having to be in Washington, DC or Olympia every day. So we try to create that pathway between the association's work and what you're doing in your district. And this is really a reflection of the needs of our members, things that people have brought to us and said, we really would like these things to happen. And so we've done that. I'm going to hand it over to George to talk a little bit about the work we do, kind of give you some examples of issues recently that we've engaged on. I can tell you right now, I know what Nicholas is meeting on, and he's meeting with Commerce on the distribution of funding for arrearages. So we're getting an update on that. That's been a process that's been underway since the legislature allocated 100 million for that purpose. Yes, Commissioner.
Looking at that list, I will have to say that PUD in the past has opened the doors for me. I've had the opportunity to travel around the country, and if it wasn't for PUD opening the doors, I would never get into some of the places, and as well as Washington, DC. A lot of doors were opened because of PUD, and I mean, I actually went to the White House and everything.
Wonderful.
It was all because of all of you people. So there's a lot more than, I didn't see that on there. So the doors that you open up for us is really incredible.
And thank you so much, Commissioner. That's first of all, excellent news. And that's exactly how we want to work as an association. And just to talk a little bit more about that, when we go back to Washington, DC, we're very successful in getting into our delegation members' offices and meeting with them. And that has a lot to do with the fact that their constituents are represented among our membership. And so they are welcoming groups of PUD representatives because they know they have PUDs within their district. And so it's, again, that collaborative effort. We might not get into one delegation member's office if we didn't have a PUD in that district. So, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to George. You want to? Yeah, keep going, keep going. Well, you know what's, you can stop me or add information. Okay. So we work on a tremendous amount of legislative issues, and I'll tell a little bit about the story that our president referred to. And this really is kind of the example of what you were talking about, Commissioner, as well as how we work cooperatively together. There was a piece of legislation that was introduced in the last session, and it was introduced based on an article that ran in the Seattle Times that was raising concern about what was happening in California with fires coming to Washington State. So a legislator, a very powerful legislator, decided we're going to do.
Interrupt you. Very well meaning.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely well meaning. You know, there's a lot of legislation that's very well meaning, but it doesn't mean that it always works, right? So we have a good working relationship with the senator. And she introduced the legislation. It was a presumed liability bill, which means that if a fire starts anywhere near your utilities equipment, the presumption is you're the cause. It's your liability issue. Of course, that raises a whole bunch of issues, as your legal counsel could tell you. And so very quickly, because Nicholas has a great working relationship with the senator, and we have a good working relationship within the utility community collectively, we were all able to come together, meet with the senator, inform her about the potential impacts of the bill, understand what she was trying to do, which was really protect against wildfire, and come up with alternative language that turned the bill into a bill that would require utilities to put together fire mitigation plans. And so it was a bill that that really was better at addressing the concern, the root of the concern. It was something that we could get behind, and we were able to do that within just a couple days. The bill had a hearing within 2 days of it being introduced. And in that hearing, we were able to get the substitute language in. So that's one way we work through the legislative process. Is just one example in how we're able to do that, thanks to the relationships we have, not just in the legislature, but with other groups as well. Recently, there's been some rulemaking going on that we've been involved in that is of interest to our utilities. We've been working as part of the rulemaking on the ambient heat rule, which you might be aware of. This is for workers who are working in the outdoors. And the intent of the rule is to keep them safe in heat conditions. And so there were some things that were problematic for PUDs because we tend to go out and work in emergency situations, and there's real safety issues about the processes that we use. And so we were able to inform that process and provide comments both in a meeting that was held publicly, but also in some formal comments that we submitted to them. So it helps shape those discussions, and we help inform those discussions. So at the end of the day, the goal is to have a really good public policy that works well for the public utility districts. Anything else you want to talk about?
So, yeah, we'll go to the next slide, perhaps.
Okay, we'll go on. Training education, we do a lot of this, and we love to see a lot of participation in this area. Go ahead and go to the next slide. There we go. So here's some of our training opportunities. I've already talked about the roundtables, the commissioner education. We share a lot with you, the industry news and information. Hopefully all of you are on our Friday Facts distribution list and get that on every Friday. That's our electronic newsletter to our members. We provide utility briefings on industry trends, issues, and opportunities. We don't just do that for our own members, but we do that for lawmakers as well. We've had several different sessions in which we have done a deeper dive in issues that are pressing for the utility community and specifically PUDs, just to make sure they have good foundational information when they go into the legislature so they're able to make an informed decision. And then we have the ability to do individual utility consultation education. If there is some special training that you need for your utility, we can arrange that. So we've done training on strategic planning. We've done training on governance. George does that, does a great job. We've done training on developing communications plans and executing those plans. So if there's a need that you have that's specific to your utility, let us know. And we might have a resource available to you that's just part of your membership. And next slide. You know, one of the great things about public utility districts is we don't compete with each other. We support each other. So we're able to, shamelessly steal from each other, right? We don't have to reinvent the wheel on many things. Or as a friend of mine said, we like to admire and acquire. That's what we do. So that's where collaboration and information sharing comes in. Next slide. And we do that through our association meetings, our annual conference, which we hold once a year, really giving an opportunity for networking. We have several different workshops. We have water workshop, which was just held in September in Spokane. We have a telecom workshop that's held every other year. And the one thing I really wanted to point out on this one is our surveys, because this is where we realized a lot of our members didn't know this existed. So if you have a specific question and you're looking for something, say you're looking for a policy or how do you deal with this situation, you can send that to WPUDA. We send it out to our membership, and then we survey membership. We compile it into a report for you, and then we send it back to you as a finalized report. We post all those surveys on our website for access by our members. So if you're looking for
like what's happening to change orders and
it could be right. I mean, it could be anything that's anything like that. Right. I had one just recently. We want all your hiring policies. So because we want to update our hiring policies. So we sent them 8 hiring policies. Or I'm looking for a policy, we're looking at enacting a new policy. Reach out to your fellow PUDs because they probably have some really good insight and input, and we can facilitate that. And that benefits everybody. So we really encourage you to take advantage of the surveys. And then again, speaking to the commissioner's comments about working cooperatively and opening doors, we share a lot of information and meet quite often with all sorts of state and regional organizations. We have very close ties within the utility community, but not just utility community, also among local governments. We meet in Olympia with different associations affiliated with local government on a quarterly basis. We now have an affiliation with the National Special Districts Coalition. So this is special districts from around the United States. That kind of gives us a different kind of inroads into federal legislation that's specific to special districts. They also have a great deal of information on pursuing grant funding that's available through the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. So we've developed those relationships so we can really, again, maximize the value of the services that we're able to offer. Next slide. Thank you for being part of WPUDA. We greatly appreciate your active participation, and you are active participants. We greatly appreciate your staff. You have a wonderful staff. They're very responsive, and we enjoy working with them as well. So you're an important part of the PUD family. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and go to the next slide, because I think I guess that's it. So we're also we're very interested as part of this process in hearing what's on your minds and how we can best support the work you do to serve your communities. So we're here to not just talk, but listen as well.
So thanks, Liz. Now I will do the slides once more, George's version. No, we're not. So thanks for having us. So I didn't want to stop. Liz never makes any errors. It's just sort of what she meant. No, she did a wonderful job. The folks who, you attend our meetings, the people that work there. I just wanted to reflect. So I've been there 11 years and there have been a lot of changes. Mike, you've probably seen many of these changes going back all these years. One of the big changes is that list of advocacy, and I've heard this from a number of commissioners who have been at the association for a long time. That list didn't exist a dozen years ago, the kind of things that we do. And we are here to support you, like the comment on the White House and the visits to DC. We're in the background. We want you empowered to make your comments, your feelings known, to impress upon our legislators, both in Olympia and in Congress, of the importance of these issues to you, to your local communities. And they will listen to you. They're polite with us, we're staff, but they listen to you and what you have to say. So I wanted to customize. There are two issues that I think are probably, well, I won't say they're the most significant, but I know we've talked about them. First is telecommunications. So 11 years ago, the PUD Association had no advocacy on telecommunications. The PUD Association spent its telecom policy committees debating what the word essential means. That's what we did. And seriously, and we hated it. But we would do it every single time. And so we decided, frankly, with the help of Chelan, that we needed to move from a debating society over the definition of a word and an information education strategy. And that's when the telecom workshop started. So we need, instead of just going around, should we provide it, shouldn't we provide it, is it essential or not, said we're going to get better informed over what this means to our communities. And that's where we are today. So the legislation, the advocacy, the funding, all the work that we do on telecom didn't exist 11 years ago. But the transition from let's have a debate over the word essential to let's find out what it really means is where we are today. And where we are today is we have wholesale authority, we have telecommunications retail authority, we have funding sources, we have state and federal dollars coming in, but we're not done. We still have issues. We have the objection process that the Public Works Board and State Broadband Office, that's flawed, if not outright improper. I'm trying to use my words correctly here. Private companies, we need to be careful when private companies have a veto power over the use of public dollars for public purposes. So there is a reason for that broadband objection process, which is you don't want to build, it's like electricity, you don't want to build two transmission lines, 230 kV lines in the same right of way. But it is not a process to thwart the ability of public entities to get money to serve the underserved and unserved. So that is a priority. We're not sure how to fix it, but we know it needs to be fixed. The other issue is water. We know that there are discussions on municipal water law. We also know that there's efforts to address the Foster mitigation decision. We don't believe ecology is going to provide legislation, but we are still interested in, at the water workshop, we talked about that. On electricity, the whole slew of green energy economy, and you talked a little bit about that earlier today, with trying to make sure our decarbonization efforts don't conflict with our ability to serve our customers, and be very clear that we identify what the costs are, what the impacts are, be supportive of decarbonization, but make sure the legislature knows what the impacts are going to be so we can address those. Nicholas is on a call, which is part of that process, which is during the pandemic, when when we did not disconnect folks, we ended up with a lot of people who could not afford their energy bills. So the legislature approved $100 million to disperse for that. That's one of the efforts that we have taken to help mitigate a variety of impacts that the energy situation devolves into. So with that, there's one other thing I just wanted to mention. So you saw that picture up there of all of us. So I will say, I like that picture better than any that's been taken since then. So I will stick with that. And they just don't like it when I say it, but I do like that picture. But one of the important things about that picture is, so in 11 years, the best thing that I've ever done is to hire the people that work for the association. 11 years ago, we didn't have Liz. I know it's hard to believe, and Nicholas weren't there, Stephanie. It is a great staff, and we've done a lot of work reorganizing. We have taken the opportunity to keep our revenues requirements even over the years by reorganizing when we have changes. But you could not have a better group of people working on your behalf, whether you're a large PUD, a small PUD, a telecom, energy, or water. Their job every day is to think about how to serve you. That's what they do. So there we go. And I still like my picture. I know they don't. I think they all look great in those pictures, but I don't get into a debate among pictures with staff. But
Actually,
these,
George, I thought that number of years ago at one of our conferences, you got in front of all of us as dressed as Doc from Back in the Future with your orange or green hair on.
that's
I
just a
thought you-
rumor.
Huh?
That was just a rumor. I don't know where you were.
I thought you looked pretty good there.
Oh, thanks, thanks. So, yeah, there's a whole vault of those, unfortunately. So that's why I have my own vault for leverage, right?
No, it's very smart. The best thing to do is to present your own incriminating evidence.
Right, yeah. So,
That's the most proactive thing to do.
well, we try to be informative and entertaining. I know we're always informative. I can't say we're always entertaining. But I appreciate that. And those are all homemade costumes, by the way, just, yes. So, and they're all waiting for Halloween. So the trick-or-treaters, they like the bear costume the best. It's scarier. The Doc one, most kids don't understand that one. So, like I said, my proudest accomplishment is people that work for the association and the great work they've done on behalf of the PUDs and community. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or what I do best is get a question and turn over to Liz.
Yeah, so I unfortunately wasn't able to attend the water workshop this year. It was, I had a birthday celebration for myself that same weekend, so, and I wanted to bring this up then, but when I look at the pictures, there's a picture missing that I'm thinking of, and that's John Counts.
Right.
And, there's a lot going right with how we're handling water and water policy and the water workshop. But I do feel a hole. In terms of the amount of support that we get from Bill Clark. Bill Clark does a phenomenal job. But he's got a lot of irons in the fire. And you know, I mean, you know what Whatcom is. We're in the middle of an adjudication. And so I'm wondering if we may need, and not just us, we shouldn't just do it for Whatcom, but where the WAPUDA may want to bring additional resources to the table in terms of supporting all the complexities of water policy that are in front of us. So I just wanted to share that.
Sure, and I appreciate that, and you're not the first to share the perspective of the loss of a valued staff. He's still alive. I mean, he just retired.
Yeah, right.
Right. No, but you know, the loss of 32 years of experience, both as government affairs and water, you know, you can't replace that. You can't go out and buy 32 years of the relationship building, the knowledge base. And so you have to adjust, reorganize. We have a project, and we're going to talk more about that at our association meetings, that Gary is leading to look at what the association needs to look like in the next 3 to 5 years. We have individual, like everything else, people are retiring, leaving, going on to other things. And so how do we develop a long-term plan for sustainability? And how do we match what we want to have done versus how much it costs to have it done?
Mhm.
That's always the challenge. So the challenge that we have faced in the association, and I'm not saying it's a bad one, I think it's a good one, is how do we effectively address the value proposition, which is what services do we provide and how much does it cost? And we're always in that kind of balance because we recognize that our association is paid for by your dues, which are paid for by your ratepayers. And so we're always cautious about those two things. We know that. We're very aware of the impact that this has. We're also aware of the other organizations you're part of. So it's part of the ongoing balance to provide a level of service that works with the amount of money it costs to provide that. And we will have that discussion. And this is going to be part of that because it's been brought up that the challenge we have in water is that many of the decisions that are made regarding water on a regulatory in nature, they're not legislative sometimes, but not always. Most of them are either Department of Health or Department of Ecology. And how you get into that process and affect change is frankly, even when John was very, very difficult. So how do we affect change in the regulatory environment? And how do we make sure that ecology is hearing what we have to say? It's a difficult process, and money isn't always the answer to doing that. So that's sort of my general response is that.
I have a specific point about that, and we started to discuss it at the last set of water committee meetings. And it came up at association level too, and that's trying to encourage, I almost use my words carefully, trying to encourage more legislative fidelity from ecology. Yeah, that's one area where, but thanks. I'm glad to hear that it's on your radar. Speaking purely for myself, WAPUDA membership and participation with WAPUDA has easily doubled my effectiveness as a commission. So that doesn't mean that it can't get better, you know, but I'm very grateful for the organization. It's probably one of the most beneficial organizations, industry associations that I've ever been part of. So
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I agree. As a commissioner that started in January of 2021, I just have to say that I think that that Waputta did a really good job navigating the pandemic. And I felt really welcomed and got a lot out of the committees that I was a part of. So, thank you for that, and for so many of you being really responsive and available to commissioners that have questions and that want to play a role in shaping state policy on issues that matter to our communities that we represent.
And you'll continue to be really, really important because, we've got significant change that have happened over the last 6 years, and our institutional memory with Commissioner Murphy's upcoming retirement is going to be much less on the commission. And of course, we can rely on staff, but Waputta will be a great place for some of that resource too. So we're going to need you a lot this next couple of years as well. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. Hopefully Nicholas is getting the right money for all of us.
Well, luckily our customers, we didn't have to twist any arms, and even if we had to twist our customers, I'm not sure we could anyway, but.
Well, we
they're
put
out
in
there
an
better than
effort.
ours.
Our effort was on behalf of all the PUDs and actually all the consumers in the state that really needed this assistance.
Yeah.
Okay, Gary, anything?
I would just like to echo what has already been said. Thank you for letting us come today, take some of your time. I'm pleased to hear that, well, I'm sorry to say that you'll be retiring, but I'm pleased to say that Waputta stands ready with all of the resources that we have to help assist any transition and training of a new commissioner that might be coming in. And again, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks all. Well, let's keep moving on our agenda here. Our next agenda item is the general manager report. That's you, Chris.
I read you 5 by 5. Just a couple quick things. First, the John Humphrey public records request is now over $46,000, but we are getting close to the end.
Quick update on that is that heard from Allison, who has our public records review in our office. We still have thousands of records to finish review and release. Next installment is scheduled for 13th of October. That's probably going to be moved to the 14th due to some vacation scheduling. The completion date is estimated for mid-November, excuse me.
So there's the update on that. That will continue. The second thing is kind of happier news. So the commissioners may be aware of the Clean Tech Alliance. It's an organization that's existed for, 20, 25 years. They've done a number of different things. They really helped when I worked in Snohomish, getting money from the state and federal government, DOE, so we could do experiments around storage, both lithium ion and vanadium flow. Anyway, they do a lot of different things. This week, they're having their first in a long time fusion week. So fusion energy is different than fission fundamentally, and I won't go into the physics of it, but instead of splitting atoms, you're actually combining small atoms, and it liberates a ton of energy. And the joke has always been that fusion is 20 years in the future and always will be. And I heard that when I was a child. In 1971, I first heard that phrase. And it hasn't changed until recently. Today, if you talk to people about fusion energy, there's a very large number of people outside of the federal government who believe that we're going to have commercial fusion reactors in the next 5 to 7 years. This is not distant horizon stuff. And In America today, there's about 28 companies that are independently pursuing it. And in Seattle alone, there are 4. It's one of the fusion hubs in America. So as part of Fusion Week, Clean Tech Alliance has organized a series of panels. And many of them are, what are the regulatory and siting and community acceptance? What are all the obstacles to adopting fusion? One of them is, how does this look from the utilities perspective? So Clean Tech Alliance has asked me and Kirk Kirkby, who is from Avista. He's a director there, or he might be a vice president of engineering now. I've worked with him for about 15 years. And Jason Zyskowski, who is the assistant general manager for power supply at Snohomish, to sit on a panel, and it'll be this Thursday at 1 o'clock. So
Can you get any buddy passes for us to watch you guys, or?
you could go ahead, and I think it's streamed.
Okay.
So it's I think it's widely available, but it's fairly predictable what we're going to be talking about. When you look at an energy source, the issue is, where is it made and how do you get it to customers who need it? And so it's all the siting issues, then it's transmission issues, all of the things that we've always talked about capacity is still true. Some of the differences are, though, it can be distributed, and fusion doesn't care whether it's day or night or whether or not the wind's blowing. So it could be a base load or rampable resource that really complements the existing portfolio and future portfolio of renewables. So anyway, I've got 10 minutes on the panel. You just heard kind of a little preview of what I'm going to be talking about. Jason and Kirk have other things, and then we'll have it wide open to the audience, and that's Thursday at 1 down in Everett. So if I'm hard to find on Thursday, my apologies, but that's where I'll be. And that's my report. Anybody have any questions for me? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Moving on to change order report. Are we going to do that? Even though, well, it's change order report and then operations report. So Brian, take it away. Oh, you're muted.
Commissioner Annette's going to handle the change order report,
Okay,
and then I'll handle the operations report.
great.
Well, I'm handling it as in I'm putting the slide up and saying ta-da, but any detailed questions would still be going to Brian. As you know, our newest update to our purchasing and our delegation of authority, we will monthly be presenting, probably emailing it out to you, and then if needed, conversations during commission meetings on the outstanding public works contracts we have and any change orders associated with that. So this is what we've come up with. And I know a lot of the discussion we have already had around the Ferndale sub, we already had during the change order that Brian presented previously. But this is the complete report right now. So if there's any additional questions outside of the Ferndale one, we can address that now.
I have none in it.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. Murphy?
So just a reminder to the commissioners, what we want to do here is provide real insight and information to you on change orders and where they stand. What we're trying to do is give you a complete overview. So this is all of the outstanding public works contracts and all of the change orders associated with them. And you'll notice that 4 of the 6 have no change orders at all, which is always our goal. We want to let the contract and then, plan the work and work the plan. It's not too difficult that way. So while I want to provide this to you, I want to make sure that we're providing to you what it is you want. So if you have any changes, and I don't mean today, I mean anytime, like 6 months from now, something comes up and you say, hey, we need a different look at this, we're fine with that. We're trying to give you something that's useful to you and useful to us for keeping track of this and in some regards herding cats.
Yeah, and I like, where we're at. I'll have input. I need to think about it a little bit. But I do want to ask about the air compressor. Something that we didn't talk about it earlier in the meeting. It's of course the largest percentage item on the screen. Could you remind me what that change order was about?
The air compressor is, we're putting on a much higher capacity air compressor at water plant 1 to basically use during frazzle ice conditions to push more compressed air through the.
Right. Okay, I remember the project now.
Yeah. Yeah, so that project's underway. In the change order, we actually changed the compressor model or, manufacturer, because it was going to be more beneficial to us and higher CFM. So it was a fairly substantial change.
And I believe we adopted that change some time ago.
Yeah,
Yes,
it was 2021, I think.
Yeah,
It's on there.
yeah. Okay, oh, yeah, I can see that. It's kind of fine print.
Yeah, so the ones with dates on them are ones that have been brought to the commission for approval.
Mhm, mhm.
The other ones were small change orders
Yeah.
that we did administratively. But again, the purpose was to get them all out there for you.
So there's no action associated with this. Are we okay moving on, commissioners?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, great. Thank you, Annette and Brian and Chris. We will look forward to looking at that in the future. And then moving on to the operations report.
yes, I'm actually really happy to be presenting this report today. I want to touch on a development that has occurred in the Bonneville rate case that, if it comes to fruition, will greatly benefit Whatcom PUD. I mentioned at the last commission meeting that the public utility customers, the power customers for Bonneville, were in settlement discussions with Bonneville. Basically, a settlement, you're all the rate case issues, you put together a package and say, here's a compromise, here's how we might settle a rate case and not have to go to the end of the rate case. As it's planned right now, the rate case would run clear into next year with Bonneville's administrator posting a record of decision. The schedule originally was for July 26, 2023. At the end of September, after lengthy discussions with customers, Bonneville presented a settlement proposal for review. And all those that received the settlement proposal, basically the public power customers of Bonneville, had until October 6th, last week, to respond, yay, nay, or we're indifferent regarding that proposal. If Bonneville, based on the comments they get, which the comments have been submitted, sees that there's a favorable response, it's very likely that the Bonneville administrator may approve the settlement proposal, essentially ending the rate case months ahead of schedule. And it allow all parties involved to then go on and do the regular business. But I wanted to bring it to you today because there's a strong inclination that Bonneville will approve this settlement. And I just wanted to point out a couple of the favorable terms for Whatcom PUD. One of the areas of concern was customers didn't want any large power rate increase, feeling that their customers have already been impacted enough, through COVID and by past rate increases. If the settlement's passed, power rates in general for customers will remain essentially flat. But for us, it's even better than that. Because we're a high load factor utility, primarily industrial load, using the forecast of the amount of power that we use and the fact that we have a high load factor, low need for load shaping services, we would actually see right now the estimate would be about a 3% power rate decrease for the next rate period, which starts next year, October. Transmission rates for all customers would remain exactly the same as they are today. Tier 2 power rates, they will be substantially higher than they were last rate period. But they'll range from $60 a megawatt hour to 63 over the 2-year period. This sounds like a lot, $60 per megawatt hour, I should say. This seems like a lot when the last rate period was, they're down in the low 30 range. But running power cost forecast models, if this settlement is not accepted and we went through to the end of the rate case, it's likely that those tier 2 rates would be about $15 a megawatt hour higher than the $60 to $63 range. So it's to our benefit that if the settlement's locked down, we won't see any higher tier 2 rates than the 60, 63. And perhaps the biggest news and the benefit for us is a fourth thing that is in the settlement, and it regards how Bonneville distributes excess funds they receive for their secondary power sales. In the contract right now, if Bonneville has met its minimum reserve requirements, they're to distribute 50% of the remaining dollars from secondary sales to the public power customers of Bonneville. If this settlement passed, that number is going to go up to 70%. So it's a significant credit back to public, direct credit back to public power purchasers of Bonneville. And to give you an example, the size of that benefit, right now at the 50% level, we're forecast based on Bonneville's performance in this operating year, Whatcom PUD will get back in credit $1.1 million to be paid back over about 10 months. If that 70% level is hit, it'll be much higher than that. So anytime Bonneville gets, I don't want to call it a windfall, but perfect conditions in the market for their sale of surplus power, we're going to benefit and benefit substantially. As it turned out, and I mentioned this before, Bonneville, the timing was just perfect this year. The market was high priced and water coming down the river came late. I'm assuming Chelan PUD benefited as well because of that, the timing of the water flows. You know, it might not happen next year. It's one of those things where everything aligned, but secondary power sales were robust this past operating year. And that, I'll stop and answer any questions you might have.
Brian, do you have that crystal ball to tell us what's going to happen between 2025 and 2030? Because I think there's going to be a real demand for power. I have no idea if there'll be a windfall power during that time, but everything points to extremely high rates for power. Are you hearing that?
I am hearing that rates will be substantially higher. Do I have a crystal ball? Absolutely not. The markets have been really volatile, and you know, power requirements have gone up. A number of utilities established new capacity records like this in the summer heat, and there's a greater demand for power, greater demand for capacity, because we are somewhat capacity short in the West Coast. So until those gaps are filled and we get more generation online and firm generation, you're going to see high prices. In terms of Bonneville getting substantial revenues from secondary sales, here again, it's market price and then how much water they've got available at the time that the market's high. So, you know, timing is part of this as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Should we move on to commissioner reports?
Well, I have the standard question about, what's our current drought situation, and are there curtailments happening and that kind of thing, river levels? I know that's on our website, but I haven't checked.
The last I looked, the flow was about 600 cubic feet, so it's very low.
I see it when I ride over the bridge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting here again, river flow timing. Basically, we got through the summer irrigation system okay, because the flows are still up, and now we're seeing, as Chris mentioned, that 600 and some CFS level. For this month, the forecast is we're going to hit record low for several days this month. But it's not having that kind of impact that it would if it happened in the August timeframe.
So because it's so late, water demand is actually coming down at irrigation water and other, it's come down in
Yeah, the irrigation season is essentially over. Now, that isn't
But,
all those folks out there with wells that see their.
Is this a record for the longest time without rain? For what?
It's the longest, in terms of measurable, yeah.
That's like a recorded history kind of longest.
I can't say recorded history, but in the last 50 years,
Mhm.
and we've kept track of flows. I think it's the longest period without measurable precipitation. Now, we had a blip in flows about a week and a half ago because there was some rain that came in the flow area, in the Nooksack Basin, but it wasn't in the whole net.
Mhm.
Yeah, I heard on the news this morning that since July 1st to now, the Seattle area has had less than half an inch of rain. Whereas Miami had 24 inches in the same time period.
Yeah, I remember 3 months or approaching 3 months, but I don't think we've ever approached 4 months. At least not in a very long time.
It's an interesting time because 2 years ago we had the lowest flow ever recorded in Ferndale. But we have precipitation at the same time.
Mhm.
And this is, but now we're having flows of 600, between 600 and 800. With a blip about a week and a half ago, we only because we had some precipitation in the mountains and none in the basin.
Yeah, we've had no impact, commissioners, on water operations. Other than there's been just a few spiky moments where river turbidity has jumped up. And not exactly sure why, other than perhaps melting glacier. And it's digging down into the underlying sediment under the glaciers.
Well, thanks, Brian. Are we good to move on to commissioner reports?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Which one of you would like to go first?
Christine, before we do that, Nicholas is back in the room with us and I like listening to him. And if you would share, I appreciate it. Would you up to say anything?
Sure. Nicholas Garcia with Waputa. I apologize for having stepped out of the meeting. There was a discussion that the Department of Commerce was leading on the arrearage funding, and I thought maybe I'd just go over that just a little bit. They have a arrearage bill across the state of $357 million, for which they have $99 million of state funds available. So they have to allocate the money. And they have developed a procedure to do that, and they started going over today, and they went over it at a high level. So there's important details that I don't know, and I want to be clear about that. But basically, what they'll do is they'll take the amount of arrearage that you have, and then proportion it by 27%. because that's the amount of money they have to cover all rearages. And then they will adjust it for the poverty index, the amount of poverty that is here relative to other parts of the state, and the amount of let's see, poverty and health disparities. And so they will make two adjustments for the amount of money that you would get, and then they will distribute the money. There will have to be a contract. You will have to, as part of that contract, say, I don't think it's in detail, but in generally how you intend to allocate the money from that you would get. Let's say let's just assume that you got $1 million. You would have to allocate that somehow to your customers, and they would have to tell you would have to tell the state how you're going to do that. And then what your plan is in terms of both who you would give the money to, but the timing. And then you would also have some certain reporting requirements. And when all is said and done, the money needs to go out by the end of the year. They do not know when they will distribute the money. It depends upon how quickly you all can take a look at the contract, which are draft contract. They'll be giving out today. And then you will be able to use that, make any comments about the contract. Are there any non-starters? I mean, things that you just simply cannot sign. And then any other suggestions. And once you have the contract, then they will just disperse the money to you. You have to disperse the money by the end of the year. And then there will be reporting requirements after the fact. They were not able to tell us what those reporting requirements would be. So that's just an example of the type of things that are going on right now. The reason why we actually have any money at all is because back in 2020, when the governor instituted the disconnect moratorium, we had pleaded for him not to do that, to give utilities a chance to work with our customers directly and identify those who were truly in need versus those who perhaps weren't as in need, but were more strategic. Obviously, that didn't happen. And so what we're doing right now is what we did during that intervening 2 years is basically demonstrate how arrearages were building up and up and up. And it wasn't just Wapouta, it was the cities and the IOUs and water districts and other sorts of utility entities. We all were working together. And that's one of the things that I guess I would say more than anything else is that when we are successful, it's 99% of the time is when we work together as a utility community. Obviously, it's really important for PUDs to stick together, but we also work with the co-ops, and we often are very well aligned with them. And we work with the cities, and we're often well aligned with them, and even the IOUs, we're well aligned with them, and the water districts and everyone else. We really are much more effective when we work together, and that's sort of the approach that we've taken, remembering who our employers are, you guys, but that we work together to come up with good solutions. And we've done the same sort of thing with the wildfire smoke bill and the wildfire risk bill that was put out last year. It's a bill that came out when it first came out was terrible. I mean, it would have basically assigned liability to utilities anytime there's a fire. And it's sort of like, you would bankrupt us. And so we explained what the problem was. We worked with our other utility brethren and sister, and we were able to completely change that bill to a point where, we actually said we supported it. And I'm assuming that bill is going to come back again this year, and we will continue to work on it. But it's by working together that we are able to be successful. And that's the approach we take, and the approach we'll continue to take. And there's like 50 different policy issues we're working on right now. I'd be happy to talk about any of them if you have specific questions, but that's just an example of the type of work that we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicholas. Let's jump back into commissioner reports. If one of you wants to take the lead.
You want me to?
I can go first. I really nothing special to report. I have had a pretty quiet 2 weeks, so
Okay.
I'm usually, you guys will know, but I'm usually consuming all the time. The commissioners report. So there, everybody's shocked right now.
For me, Christine, with this COVID and trying to communicate with people and visit with people, and phones just don't cut it for me, neither do the Zoom. I've been busy again, actually visiting people. Of course, my heart is always in with water issues and dealing with water in Whatcom County. So I've been doing a lot of visiting, and I see there is a great need for us, the PUD, not only to continue to be involved as we are with staff and as commissioners, but to get more involved. And there's a lot of issues out there just besides adjudication. But I was going to ask the two of you, would you be open to possibly having a few water workshops? And whatever you want to talk about, if you want to know about our past, if you want to know where we're at right now, but what we're going to deal with in the future. I know we do a lot of talk about adjudication, but it is only one of very many things that we should be aware of. If you think there's something that you'd like to hear more about, I would like your permission to meet with Chris and staff and come up with a few workshops on discussing these. Is that something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, I'd be interested in that. And I assume you're talking about water supply for small, particularly small, increasingly disenfranchised people who are running wells that are dry and so on and so forth.
Well, that will be one of them, because right now we are in this no streams flow, low stream flow, wells are dry in Whatcom County. And we have that drought contingency plan. And I'm not even aware of it being open to look at what could we possibly be doing for the community under that. I don't even know if we have the language in there to say what we should do. So it's things like that I think we should be made aware of, because right now, I believe as a PUD, we could be reaching out to some of these private wells that are literally dry right now. And then the streams are big. I think Bertrand is running dry right now. Am I close to that? Correct to that?
No, they're still at about 3 to 4 CFS right now, but essentially it doesn't provide any habitat for fish at that level.
Correct. So there's a lot of things if you're open to it, like to put together something and let Chris and staff take over. And we have a lot of people outside that can speak to us too, that I've met with this past couple of weeks, and great knowledge that maybe we can invite them to come and share their knowledge and what's going on too, if you're interested.
I think that would be great, Commissioner Murphy. And I think especially, like you said, having some folks that we haven't heard from before in the community come in, especially if you have some relationships that you want to make sure you're that others on the commission and staff continue to nurture after your retirement.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I think it's going to take, Chris, I think it's going to take a couple workshops, because everything that's going on in Whatcom County right now, if we sat down and listened to these people presented to us, I think it'd be way over our heads. So we need to start off a little slower, get a little background. I'm not sure, Chris, and you and staff would decide what we should talk about, but then maybe work up to some of these bigger issues that are out there.
Commissioner, are you available tomorrow?
What is tomorrow?
Wednesday?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, check your calendar. I know I've got some white space on the calendar and be happy to get together. I was at the water workshop and that Whatcom put on. It was outstanding, by the way. And I have everything that they talked about, all those presentations. So there's a ton of stuff that Whatcom can help us with that I can bring to the table. Obviously, between Steve and Rebecca, we've got a wealth of knowledge here that I'm just beginning to tap. And then everything else that you can bring, let's talk about it and get some workshops together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And of course, our meetings would be open to the public, and there would probably be those in the public who want to attend some of these meetings too. So I think it's a good opportunity.
Particularly the private wells caucus.
Yeah. So thank you. That would be it.
Thanks, Commissioner Murphy. My report I have a quick slide I was gonna show. We are non-voting members of the Whatcom Council of Governments Transportation Policy Board. But I wanted to just let everyone know that they do a Whatcom region metropolitan and regional transportation plan, and it's called Way to Go Whatcom. And like I said, we are non-voting members, but I started working with Councilmember Galloway back in the spring to get some language about broadband in this most recent update. So the plan, this Way to Go Whatcom plan, is on the agenda to be adopted tomorrow at the Transportation Policy Board meeting. And just wanted to share what was in there. And other than that, had a few meetings with Chris and did a meeting with the Technology Alliance Group for Northwest Washington, TAG Northwest, the connectivity group yesterday. And then the last thing is that I did hear from a constituent shortly after our last commission meeting with some feedback that all of us use way too many acronyms. And I think we're probably all guilty of that. And many of us all know what acronyms mean, but not everyone does. And it can really diminish folks' ability to understand what we're talking about. So just putting a plug out there for all of us to try to stop using acronyms, or if when we do use them, we explain what they are, to just be clear communicators. So that is it for me. And we can move on to public comment.
Rick has a comment.
Rick Miracle is coming to the microphone.
Hello, Rick.
Hello. Good morning. I wanted to make a comment about your plans around development at Cherry Point. And there was one issue there that was not mentioned in that discussion, but I think is quite important. Several years ago, the Lumbee Nation clearly articulated their vision for the future of Cherry Point. And that was that everything that is there would be removed and the area returned to a natural state to support the herring fishery in the Strait of Georgia. And shortly after that time, the majority political party in the county endorsed that position. So I think both Commissioner Murphy and Commissioner Deshmani touched on the results of that attitude in the problems that they encountered with projects in the county. And if you recall, a couple of years ago, there was a project with one of the industries at Cherry Point to put in a renewable fuels project, and that was had so many delays and other things piled upon it that they finally gave up. Until such time as these two competing visions for Cherry Point, one development from the port and the PUD, and the other get rid of development, until such time as those two visions can be reconciled in some way, I don't believe that anything will be able to be done out there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah, it's a really good complimentary point to our discussion that we had, that perhaps was quiet and we all had it in our heads, but it wasn't verbalized. So thanks for verbalizing.
I'm not seeing any hands on the Zoom. Are there any other in-person public comments?
There's nobody else here.
Great. Or okay, perfect. Let's see then. Anything else then for the good of the order before we close the meeting? All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming to our meeting, and the meeting is now closed. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.